Welcome everybody to INE's CCI Service Provider V4 Advanced Technologies class. My name is Brian McGann and I'm going to be your instructor for these particular sessions. For those of you that haven't attended a class with me before or seen any of my previous videos, I am a CCI in service provider as well as routing and switching, security, data center, as well as a Cisco certified design expert. You can see my contact information there. So during class or after class, if you have questions, feel free to shoot me an email. It's bmcgann@ine.com. And additionally, my Twitter there is @BrianMcGann and linkedin.com/bmcgann. Now, in terms of today's agenda, first thing we're going to be going through is just an overall overview of the class in terms of what are the topics that are going to be covered, what is the format that they're going to be covered in. Then we'll talk about the new Service Provider version 4 blueprint and talk about what changed between version 3 and version 4. Also talk about the specific hardware topology, what am I going to be using during class, what can you use after class, and then how does that compare with the actual hardware specification used in the actual lab exam. And then we'll get into our technical topics. So specifically for today, technical topics, we should be able to get to at least our iOS XR introduction, and then also into some core routing topics in terms of OSPF and ISIS routing. So next then, for those of you that haven't attended this class before or in other tracks, what is the Advanced Technologies class? And essentially what this class is in order for us to learn a structured approach for the configuration, the verification, and the troubleshooting of the technologies that are within the scope of Service Provider version 4. So most of the class we'll see is going to be me doing live hands-on examples. There are going to be some technology explanations. There are going to be some slides that I'm going through, but the main focus really is going to be hands-on live on the equipment. Now, related to this, as you guys will likely see as I'm going through these examples, this is not pre-scripted. So as I run into configuration errors, as I need to do troubleshooting, that is going to be live troubleshooting live on the CLI. So even though I could script it out in advance and have everything go 100% smooth, it's generally better for, from your point of view, to see how I would approach the problems as an expert engineer. What's my reasoning process as I go through verification? What's my reasoning process as I go through the troubleshooting? Because ultimately, when you get to the service provider lab exam, you're going to have to know how to do this methodology yourself. So like I mentioned, there will be some slides, but most of the class is going to be focusing on hands-on examples, looking at how to configure the topics, and then most importantly, how to verify and how to troubleshoot them as well. Now, in terms of course prerequisites, ideally everyone has a basic understanding of the iOS implementations of IPv4 and IPv6 routing. In terms of our interior gateway protocols like OSPF, ISIS, EIGRP, and RIP, typically out of this particular list, if you don't have experience with ISIS, don't worry about that. We're going to start with a basic overview of the protocol. And mainly, if you understand how OSPF works, you'll see that ISIS is very similar in its operation. Okay, we do also assume that everybody has a pretty good understanding of BGP, because the core focus of this class is going to be MPLS and BGP's interaction in terms of both layer 3 MPLS VPNs and layer 2 MPLS VPNs. So we will talk about some overview of BGP. How does route reflection work? How does confederation work? How does full mesh work? But we're not going to focus on really the basics of BGP. We're more focusing on the specific MPLS applications. Beyond that, in terms of services, we will be looking at MPLS multicast. So this does assume that you have a basic understanding of intra-AS multicast, or basically multicast within an enterprise in terms of either sparse mode or source-specific multicast. And then we're going to be focusing on the MPLS-based multicast, like MPLS over L3 VPN. Okay, the one thing I do want to mention here, though, is that if you don't have a lot of experience with iOS XR, don't worry about that. One of the first technical topics that we're going to cover is an overview of iOS XR, talk about some of the differences between regular iOS and XR, what are some of the common syntax things that you do, how does the show commands work differently, how do the config commits work differently, and you'll see once we get into the specific technologies, like in terms of OSPF routing, BGP routing, as long as you understand from a fundamental technology point of view, how does OSPF work, then you just need to know what are the minor syntax differences or what are some of the caveats that are related to iOS XR. So essentially all of the topics that we're going through, we are going to be covering them both in regular iOS and in iOS XR in terms of MPLS L3 VPN provider edge or MPLS traffic engineering, fast reroute, etc. So we'll be looking at these side by side, both of the network operating systems. Now, in terms of a general course outline, of course, now we're going through our basic introduction. Then, like I mentioned, we'll start with an overview of iOS XR, comparing and contrasting some of the differences, some of the similarities between regular iOS and XR.